if you have any questions about these positions or anything else at WSU. But the first position is a blueberry potato pathologist that will be in the Department of Plant Pathology, but housed at Mount Vernon. As you may know, if you know if you're familiar with the research center there, Debbie Inglis used to cover potatoes and seed potatoes, Western Washington potatoes, and Tobin Peaver for the last several years has covered our fruit pathology. So both of those have retired now, or Tobin's in the process of retiring, and we're trying to, you know, maintain this expertise at the university. So the focus will be on disease control of both blueberries and Western Washington potatoes and seed potatoes. We've got support from both the Blueberry Commission and the Potato Commission, which I'm really grateful for. We wouldn't be moving on this position right now if we didn't have that support. I wouldn't have gotten it approved because I simply didn't have the startup money yet. So both of those commissions are contributing to startup in a big way. We've also raised some money from locally at the Mount Vernon Research Center and Plant Pat Department, and kind of pass the hat like we always do when we're trying to generate a startup. It costs a lot of money for startup to hire a good person these days. There's pretty high expectations. You know, it's got to be like at least $500,000 or something usually to get somebody good. It's hiring is probably the most important thing I do, because it's the biggest impact I have on the university is making sure we hire really well. This will be a relatively early career scientist, so we expect them to be around 20, 30 years. So, you know, it's important to hire well. On this one, the search committee's been established, and we're ready to send the advertisement out. I've just decided to wait after this week so I could talk to some Berry folks and you know, make sure everybody's on the same page with this position.
Scott?
Yeah.
Could you tell me if they're going to replace Gary Grove with a new plant pathologist for wine grapes and other permanent crops?
Yeah, the next Gary Grove, the next tree fruit position is going to be a tree fruit pathologist, endowed chair. It's not going to be a Gary Grove replacement. It's going to be focused more on bacterial diseases of like fire blight is, you know, people are pretty concerned about. Then, you know, Gary hasn't retired yet. In fact, he's teaching this spring. So, you know, that's a little bit down the road. I'm not exactly sure when he's going to retire, and I'm not really even supposed to ask that question.
Well, that's good to hear, because Ken Johnson's going to retire from OSU.
Right.
So we've got both universities have got a void for those bacterial diseases. I'm glad to hear that. So.
Right. Yeah. Yep. That's you know, we had this discussion yesterday with the Tree Fruit Endowment Advisory Committee, and I explained it to them that if I could focus this person completely on bacteria, then when Gary does retire, I can say we don't have a tree fruit fungal pathologist, and I'm pretty sure we'll get that one will fly. The next position is we'll probably pull the trigger on next year, but this is the PAT replacement basically. The focus will be on, it sounds like people really want a breeder who releases varieties. I want to make sure that they're part of a regional collaboration, like it sounds like has been going on. You know, you know, if we're releasing raspberry varieties, they don't have to be WSU varieties. They could be WSU-OSU varieties or WSU Canada varieties or whatever. I just like to contribute to a regional crop improvement program. So I'm kind of collecting information on what people think about other specialties this type of person might have, so that they fit in best with the industry, and then the complementary expertise among the private program, public programs, whatever. Do we want a person that's a germplasm specialist to kind of broaden the germplasm base? Or do we want somebody who's an expert in different quality traits? Or, do we want a pathologist background, physiologist, in addition to genetics? So if you got any ideas on this type of thing, I'd love to hear them. We've got support for the Raspberry Commission on this one. They are saving their pennies and dollars to make a future endowed chair. Not exactly sure how long that's going to take, but it sounds like it's going to be too long for us to want to wait that long. So, we want to keep, Wendy can keep the breeding program going for a while, but we don't want it to be 5 years. So we're going to try and get it on next year's hiring plan. Support from that, we'll be passing the hat again around Pullman and Mount Vernon and to collect the startup we need. Other support for these fruit breeding programs are starting to be pretty significant royalties from some of our programs, especially the apple one, which you've probably heard of. The Cosmic Crisp just came out in stores last week. You've probably seen it in advertisements in magazines or on the news. If you're already sick about hearing it, I'm sorry about that. That's my fault. They've planted 12 million trees so far. So I'm a little bit scared that, if it lays an egg, well, who's going to buy all those apples? This year, there's only about 400,000 boxes, but next year and the year after, it's going to be a crazy amount of fruit. It's already I think in the top 8 apples in Washington in terms of acreage. So and nobody's even really tasted one yet. So it's a little bit scary, but so I'm spending a lot of the royalties on advertising right now, but around 2022, 2023, it's going to be generating quite a bit of royalties. And a lot of that will go back into it's already supporting the apple breeding program, but the intention is it will help support some of the other fruit breeding programs as well. So I'm going to stop there and take any more questions that you have about either position or anything else you're wondering about at WSU. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Scott. At this time, we'd like to go ahead and introduce Dory Main, Associate Professor of Bioinformatics, on using crop databases and big data in order to enable superior cultivar development.
Good morning, can you hear me fine? Okay, so as you can see, I changed the title of my presentation. So I've changed it to Database Resources for Small Fruit Research. And really the purpose of this talk is really to give you an idea about what resources are being made available by the federal government for us to manage all the data and integrate that data for use in research for small fruit. And just want to point out, I'm giving this presentation, the people there that are in purple, they're the team that actually do a lot of the work in my program. And then the folks in red are major co-PIs on projects that help fund this research. So what I'm talking about really stems from a project called National Research Support Project 10. And in this project, what we do is we develop databases for underserved crops, mostly specialty crops. And so that includes rosaceae, vaccinium, pulse crops, and citrus. Now you're probably wondering why I'm working on citrus in Washington State, but it's part of the overall plan of the database structure. This has been funded for, it'll be a 10-year block now. It's going through 2024, $4.5 million to WSU to do this work. It's also been supplemented by funding from SCRI and NSF funding to about $5 million. So in terms of the small fruit crop databases, there's two that are covered in here. First one is the genome database for rosaceae, which has the rubus crops and the Fragaria, the strawberry in there, and then so the genome database for vaccinium, which has blueberry and cranberry. I'll not go into the funding of them, but I did want to just point out that there's a new project that has been funded, the SCRI, the Vaccinium CAP project that Lisa DeVetter is leading from WSU, and it's coming out of North Carolina State. It's $6.5 million from the federal government, and it's matched by resources from industry and universities who are the partners that are working on this project. So that's going to be a superb project over the next 4 years. Slow down. Okay, I've only got 10 minutes. You can't understand me, I'm too slow. Okay, so this project, I don't know how to go slowly, I'm Scottish, I don't know how to go slow. So this project is a 4-year project which will develop a lot of tools and resources for development of fruit cultivars, well, for blueberry and cranberry cultivars, amongst other things. Okay, and these databases are well used. The rosaceae one, in the last 5 years, we've served 2.1 million pages have been accessed. People use it for their research. The vaccinium one, they don't have as much data. It's not such a big community, so it's not used quite as much yet. So what is a community database, or what am I talking about that? So basically, it's a place where we collect all the data that's out there in the public domain for the crops that we're interested in. So that's genomics, genetics, and breeding data. And the reason that they've partly getting so big and so popular is because every scientist now has the ability routinely in the fruit industry, fruit research, especially if you work in genomics, genetics, and breeding area, to basically sequence genotype and phenotype anything they want, because the technologies have become so fairly routine, but pretty inexpensive to do. And so now what we're doing is we're dealing with big data, and we're dealing with a change in how we do research. It's led now by big data. So in order to utilize that big data, a lot of that data, you could utilize it for your particular experiment if you're a researcher, but a lot of the value of that data comes from reusing the data. So being able to keep that data in a repository, distill it for more useful pieces of information. So for example, when we look at gene expression data, we're talking about billions of data points that have been generated by publicly funded research experiments. They are absolutely useless to other researchers because there's no way to truly take that data and make it useful. So that's the kind of value of the database community. They take that data and they distill it down into useful pieces that they serve back out to the breeders and to the researchers in general. These databases come with integrated tools, so you can go in and do research. You can query the database for what your question is. So say, for example, a breeder wants to identify, what's known about a particular resistance. What genes are associated with that resistance? What QTLs do we know? What markers are available? All that is already pulled from the public domain into these databases. And so that information gives you something to start with, so you're not reinventing the wheel. And it's also, these databases really help build research communities together to coalesce around a platform for their research endeavors. Okay, just to show you how the data has changed over. So look, in 2008, we had hardly any data in the rosaceae database. 5 years later, look what we've got in there. But then look at 2019, we've got, 10 over almost 11 mil, we've got more actually now, 11 million genotypic data points in there for rosaceous crops compared to 28,000 5 years ago. So the amount of data that's been generated is just, it's huge now. And one of the reasons we can get funding from the federal government for these projects now is the recognition that what are we going to do with that data? We shouldn't be investing all that money in generating that data and not making it available again for other scientists to use. So I just want to give you a quick example of things you could do with this. So here's the genome database for rosaceae. And you can see here we've got here I'm just highlighting the major genera that you can come from. So into Fragaria. And this would take you to the home page for all the Fragaria species. An overview of the type of data that we have in there. And then here you can see specific data categories. They only show up if we have data for that particular set of crops. So a researcher can go in and can see what's already available. And then we also have the tools that are available for that particular crop. At the top menu, you can see we have this top menu that's present throughout the database, and you can see under the search category, these are the type of categories that the data types that the researcher can search for. So you can see they can search for trait evaluation data, they can search for what's known about trait loci in the database, they can see what genotype data, what germplasm data we have. And one of the things that we do with these databases, we do actually take all the public data from GRIN and we put it into these databases and integrate it with the other data. It makes it much more usable for researchers. We look at the tools. You can see here a variety of tools, and these tools serve from basic discovery all the way through to application and breeding. And so I'm just going to highlight one in particular right now, this breeding information management system, which we call BIMS. And so this is a platform, this is a suite of tools that we've developed within these databases, and allows the breeders to be able to do all these components here. They are able to manage their breeding programs, so they upload all their information from the breeding programs. They get to control it completely. They can upload their own data, they can download data, they can search their data, they can do lots of statistics and analysis. It's connected up to high performance computing at WSU, so they have the capacity to actually do the type of searching in a fairly quick manner that they need to do for their research. And we're building more and more tools into this platform. Importantly with this one, what it does, and this is somewhat unusual for most of the crop databases, is that we connect it up with the public data. So a breeder who has a private secure program within the breeding information management system has access to all the public data without anyone having access to their data. And that is a very powerful thing. So if they're, if they're interested in a particular trait, they can be searching and doing all that within their own secure portal and getting all the marker data that they might be interested, and also the genotype data in there and the germplasm data. One of the things that we have been promoting quite strongly is the use of an app called Fieldbook. It came out of Jesse Poland's program in Kansas State, and it really helps breeders being able to collect efficiently and accurately their phenotypic data, and then they're very easy for them to upload it to the database or download the template file into that. And so we have breeders across Rosaceae using it, and it will be used in the new Vaccinium CAP project extensively, as will the breeding information management system. The other important thing just to mention about this system is the archive function. So every night, so breeders can go in, click a button and download everything to their program. They can do it the whole thing, or they can do the increment since the last one. But what's really important about this is that every night we back this up. So at any point, a breeder could only possibly lose the data they'd put in that day to that system. And just to give you an example, a colleague of mine at Clemson, she has been using this system, but also backing everything up at Clemson. And then there was a problem with something at Clemson, and all that data was gone, all of it. Fortunately, it was still in our system here, because we back it up nightly and we don't overwrite that data. So we have it, and we store it in 2 different locations, one in Pullman and one up in Spokane. So that's an example of where this is very, very useful. And that's just an example of showing you, some of the interface of here, and it's hard to see it, but the phenotype data, you're seeing the distribution of the range of the phenotypic data that's been collected. You can filter, you can make lists, you can upload the planning of your crosses, all that kind of information. And it's been driven by what breeders want. So we work with breeders on what should be in here and what they need. And that's all I have, because I only had 10 minutes. So just acknowledge the bioinformatics community that develop a lot of this open source tools that we are able to implement and use ourselves. The Rosaceae and the Vaccinium community for their support and data, and the bioinformatics community. So the bioinformatics team would do all the work, most of the work, and all the co-PIs. And then the funding sources is funded by these range of places, and that's all I have. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Any questions?
You must have a question for me. Oh, sorry. Okay. So the main thing that I guess I'm really trying to convey is there's the government and industry, because this has been supported by industry quite a bit as well, are making the resources available to enable scientists to use the data that they are generating and other people are generating in a very usable, I think, hopeful way. And it's a big deal, because without them providing the funding for that, we're not like the other crops, like the maize and the sorghums and the wheat people that get federal line through of money. This is all competitively funded. We have to justify this and get this. We don't have money every year. And as a community moving forward, actually, we should get the government to make this that they do allow for funds for this, because it's a fundamental resource now for research, I think. So, okay, all right, we good? Okay, thank you.